Good morning, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. How are you all doing today? My name is Infantred, and this is the Orion puzzle. This puzzle is, in essence, the one that started it all. Now, at my work, we had a slow week, which every job has, so I looked up plans for wooden puzzles, and I found one of these, with 18 pieces. And this is also the puzzle that I developed the methods for, which I used in the previous video. The pieces of this puzzle are physically larger than the ones I used in the previous puzzle. These measure 24mm by 24, instead of all my other puzzles which are 20 by 20. And the reason this one is 3 different colours is because that's just what we had left. And also I actually do quite like having 3 different colours, so a nice coincidence. Now this one wasn't actually the first version of the puzzle that I made. The actual first one of this design which I made is that. Exactly the same puzzle, exactly the same pieces, once again bigger. These are 30mm by 30mm. So, in this video, I want to make this puzzle a third time, but using the same size pieces as everything else, which is 20 by 20. So I have somewhat skipped ahead in the build process and already cut all of the pieces to length, since they're all the same length, and that's kind of the more boring part of the build. Now this puzzle is a bit more complicated than the previous one, purely because there are 7 unique parts, as opposed to the previous, which has 2. I have all of them listed out here, with the dimensions for 30mm, which is the very first one I made. So in my head I need to convert these to 20mm, which is what these are, and then it should be fine. For all of these pieces, I'm going to start from the outside and work my way in. I'm going to start with the shortest one, which is piece type 2, with only 10mm from the outside. Then I can move on to, say, piece type 1, which is 20, and then go more into the puzzle for all of these pieces. And one thing I forgot to do, which I have now since done, is put numbers on the ends of all the pieces. Because that is the reason I have piece type 1, 2, 3, and so on written out here. So I can see how many of each I need, so that I don't need to look at this plan every single time. Piece type 1 I need 10 of, so those are here. I need 1 except for piece type 3, which I need 2 of, so that I don't confuse myself during this build and make too few or too many of one particular piece. Should have done that before, but I've done that now. Good enough. So I've now finished cutting all the pieces I was supposed to do, and another reason I have numbers on all the pieces is just to figure out which ones I need to cut and which ones I don't. Now I have done the first cut on all of them, which is 10mm from the outside. Now what I need to do is the second cut on piece type 2 here, where I need a gap of 20mm. So I've already put out the pieces I need, which are piece type 2, 3, and 5, and 6. Everything else I can put on a separate pile. Those I don't need to bother with, only these. So skipping ahead just a moment, and I've now completed cut number 3, which is 20mm from the outside. Now I will say that it's not necessarily the amount of pieces that makes a puzzle more difficult to build, it's the amount of unique pieces, meaning the amount of times you need to change this. That is really the most time-consuming part. Since piece type 1 is already done and there's 10 of those, I can put those to the side. I just need to adjust the side once and then just do all 10 of them. That doesn't really take that long. It's just having to do this 8 different times. As well as the amount of unique pieces, I have piece type 5 and 6, which are a mirror of each other. You see, one cut is on the opposite side here. That means, once this is fully assembled, I can take a piece and plop it through there. So I'm going to make most of these pieces off camera, since the process is exactly the same for all of these pieces. And finally, I have all that done with all the pieces carved out. This took quite a while just because of the amount of unique pieces I have. These are all the same, so that was relatively straightforward. You have these, which are, every single one is unique except for number 3, and there's 2 of those. That doesn't really help. I believe it was piece type 4, which was the only piece type with that one cut. So I need to stop what I'm doing, adjust the saw, and make one single cut of that one piece. It just takes time, it's not particularly difficult. Now I can get on to the easier part, which is just carving out all the pieces. Lower the saw blade by just a couple of millimeters, and off I go. Now in addition, I did also mark off in pencil which pieces I actually need to carve out. So I have this one section, if I turn it over, I have that very thin piece and then this larger one. So on the right is what it's supposed to look like. Just because these pieces are relatively complicated and I have so many unique ones, it can be difficult to keep track of these. I have also made spares of the exact same length, but they're currently uncut and sitting on my workbench. If I do make a mistake, it's always nice to have some spares. So I'm just partway through hooking out all these pieces, and something I've yet to mention is what order I remove the wood in. It does depend on the piece, but I would personally always start with the smaller ones, so these ones, and then the last piece I do would be the largest cut. This is entirely due to safety, because if I have this larger cut first, and I place it here, you can see now there is no support on the back end, so this can jiggle about the place. If I were to do that one last, I would have it here, so there is some support on the back. I found that out with the piece type 1, which is the one I have to do 10 times. First I do the smaller one, and then I do this larger one. Again, that's due to safety, because if I start with the smaller one, to switch to my left hand here, I have enough space to put my fingers here, where there's still some wood, so I can hold the piece like this. If I take a piece I already completed, and starting with the small one, I still have somewhere to put the fingers. If I were to start with the larger one, there is less material here for me to grab, so I either need to have my other hand on the other side of the saw blade, or I need to take this and push really, really, really hard. Again, there's no material on the right side, so this can just push off. So when doing really large cutouts like this, it is quite important to know what order to cut them out in. And here we are with all of them cut out. You may have seen during the time lapse that I was doing some test fits with the pieces. If we take piece type 7, see this one only has one cutout, and if this is supposed to be the same size as the rest of the pieces, but doesn't actually fit. Well, it does if you really force it. So I'm going to adjust these pieces to make these individual joints fit. I'm going to do that now before I start to route everything, just because it's easier and I'm already using the table saw. I need to raise the blade ever so slightly to be the same height as these outer cuts, and then I'll show you how I adjust it. I don't actually adjust these pieces by measuring like I would normally for the initial cuts. What I do is just plop the piece against the saw blade, And then take the side and move it just barely so that it's not touching. Then, with my left hand, I would push against the side and move it forwards and backwards. With my right hand, I would adjust this to move it to the left, meaning this will keep getting bigger. I will keep doing that until I feel a slight bit of friction. I can move this by eye, and then I move forward. There we go. You might be able to hear that already, but the tips of the blade are slightly scraping against the inside, which is exactly what I want. I'm going to keep going just a tiny bit. There we go. Then I keep touching the front and I'm no longer able to go in. Now this does result in these black marks, but they're really easy to sand away. It doesn't really cost that much time. I'll do that for all of these pieces, and then I'm going to plane them. So now with all of the pieces adjusted for the first time, it is now time to carve out all the middles and then assemble the puzzle. I've already set up the router using the same drill bit method here to get the depth exactly right. And once again, because I have a large amount of unique pieces, I would like to talk about the order I'm going to carve these out in. Since some pieces may be off-centered, some pieces may have weird carve out and this extra bit in the middle. So I cannot just pass once straight through. What I could do is have a backing piece, just this one to choose one at random, and then I could take two pieces which have a gap at the same position. Let's say these two. Put those in there, and then at the front I could take another random piece. Let's say this one. So with that, I can now pass through the first one, carve out the second one here, and then use this third one to make sure I don't actually go too far into that fourth. Or I could have this one all the way at the back, it doesn't really matter. So this means I could only really do one or two at a time, which is a bit annoying, it does take some time, but it does mean I get to do every single piece without having to change this machine at all. But first, just to keep things simple, I'm going to do the 10 identical ones. So another relatively large time jump forward, and I have now assembled the puzzle. The reason why it took me so long is because I severely made a mistake. If I can just put some B-roll up while I disassemble this. I made two pieces wrong. The piece type 5 and 6 was supposed to have a hole cut out on one side, but I put that on the completely wrong side for both of them. Instead of just remaking the two pieces with the two spare pieces I had, specifically in case this were to happen, my fantastic brain thought it would be a good idea to simply adjust pieces I already had. Namely piece type 7. In the original design, this one only had one small cutout. But now, I turned it into this, with two large cutouts on both sides. You can see here is where the gap was supposed to be, and in fact I enlarged this gap just by 10 millimeters. So now the solution is, you push everything down, insert the modified piece, right here, and then you push the two left ones up, only. Finally you can insert the last piece. Once you have it inserted, in order to push these two pieces back up, you shove that to the side, push these two up, and finally push this back. So that now you have that gap closed. Finally you can put in the key piece, which has no notches in it whatsoever, and assemble the puzzle. I still have the two spares, but I didn't use them. Anyway, I still need to adjust this, because as you clearly saw there, it takes a while to assemble. Adjust these, sand them, finish them, and then come back when it's all done. And finally, after quite a while, we have the puzzle finally done. As I suspected, this is much smaller than the original version. And as for the disassembly process, I did say that I messed up on my new one. So the process on the original one, I think the key piece is one of these oak ones. Yeah. Shove out the key piece. This one doesn't have any notches on it whatsoever. And then you take this, in this case beach piece, slide it out straight like that. Then you can continue disassembling the puzzle. However, on my version, you can put this back together. You can still push out the key piece, just like so. Again, no notches on this whatsoever. But then you push down these two, and you can slide out one piece, push down the second two, and then you can slide out my modified piece, like that. Then, after this, the disassembly and reassembly process for these two puzzles are exactly the same. I did realize that my original method of disassembly was to just push down these middle two pieces instead of these outer two. So that notch in the middle is actually useless. You can do both. If that notch was filled, you needed to do this method, but now you can also push down these middle two and go from there. So that was certainly an interesting build, and my next puzzle is going to be something rather different from this. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.